If you and your students are tired of the same old, then maybe it's time to try a new twist on an old favorite. We'll talk all about this in today's episode. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. This episode is brought to you in part by the Herzog Foundation. So if you don't know me, my name is Julie. I am the podcast manager here at Teach for the Heart. At the time of recording this, Linda is currently on sabbatical. She will be back soon, but I am excited to be joined by Amanda. So thank you for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
So today we're going to talk about ways that you can make old lessons new again with simple, engaging tips. And Amanda, you talked about how it's important to know what is engagement and what it is, what it isn't, because sometimes us teachers get it twisted in our head. So did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the big question is, what is engagement? And in this world that we're in, you can often get it confused with entertainment, where while being very entertaining can be engaging, that is not what engagement is. So when we talk about student engagement, that really refers to the degree of attention and curiosity and interest and passion that the students are showing whenever they are learning in a lesson. And it's more than just simply like behaving, because a student can be sitting in their chair, they can have their eye contact, they can be making notes, but they are not engaged. They are clocked out. They are just simply following the behavioral expectations. And that is not engagement. And then you can also be up there and be super entertaining and have all these different voices and these videos and all these different manipulatives. And that can just be chaos. That is not engagement. For students to be engaged, there's three different types of student engagement. There's behavioral engagement, there's emotional engagement, and there's cognitive engagement, where behavioral engagement, that's like what you would think of, are they actually behaving properly in your class? They're not turned around, face somebody else. They're paying attention. They're doing all the right things with what a good student would look like in class. Mm-hmm. And then when you think of emotional engagement, that's whenever students feel safe to ask a question, because oftentimes teachers can say, who has any questions? And nobody raises their hands because they may not feel safe in that space to ask a question, whether it's just because, they don't want to look stupid in front of a friend, or maybe it really is they're kind of scared to ask for help in front of you. Do they value the material that you're teaching? Do they feel left out of a certain type of discussion or activity that's going on in the class? And then you have the cognitive engagement, and that's really working their brain, getting those higher order thinking questions, challenging them, having them take ownership in their own education. So yeah, it's really important to understand what engagement is and what it is not, so you can properly plan your lessons to be engaging.
Right. And I can even remember one time I was doing an activity that I thought was very engaging, and a kid in the front row just shouted out, "I'm bored." And I said, "Well, it's not my job to entertain you. It's my job to teach you." And he said, "Aren't you supposed to do both?" And of course, I got a little offended. I'm sure looking back now, I probably could have responded better in that situation. But yeah, we do know that engagement is important, right? It's not entertainment, but we do want to engage their minds, getting them to collaborate with one another. And all of those things really do help them retain it more than just sit and get. So
Yeah.
we've been thrown strategies left and right. And that's not our goal today, is to tell you how you should do things. Obviously, every classroom is different. Every teacher is different. Every class period is different. So really, we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. We just want to give you some tips and tricks that we've used in our classrooms that we think you could hopefully implement in yours. So Amanda, did you have a fun idea that you wanted to share to help your students be engaged?
Yeah, but first I want to share one quick story. Your little story made mine come to mind.
Stories. Yes, you tell.
Whenever I was doing my student teaching, I had this fun, because you had to be fun. I had this fun activity planned where we were using macaroni noodles to glue them down for quotations, to work on these jokes, and it was just a lot of fun. We had jokes, we had macaroni, we had glue, like it was going to be fun. But then after it, my supervisor came up and she's like, So what was the point of all that? Couldn't that 40-minute activity have been done in 5 minutes with a pencil and paper? Like, so I had all this fun stuff, but it was entertaining, but it was a big waste of time. So fun does not always mean effective. So
That's
um
true.
so I do have a quick idea, and this can be used for any grade level, for any subject. And is to simply ask the question, how would you teach this? So this can be done at the start of a unit or a lesson, or at the very end as a review. And this could be, or you could have this just as a discussion time. They can talk with each other in class. They can talk with you. This can be done as centers. If you have some younger kids and you have centers in your class, they can kind of work together. If we were the teacher, what would we do? How would we teach our classmates this? They can be homework. They can actually create a lesson on how they would teach this to the class tomorrow. It can be an extension project, or it can be an enrichment project for some kids, but just answering the simple question, how would you teach this? And it also gives those kids kind of the power back of like, well, this is what I would do when you didn't do this.
Right. Okay, that is such a good point because my idea that I was gonna share, similar but a little different. So I love that you said, having them teach because my idea, this is one that I've used with my middle school kids, and they absolutely love it. You wouldn't think so maybe at first, but we do what was called a student teacher swap. So basically, the day or two after learning a new topic, they're not quite experts on the subject, but they're familiar enough with the terminology. I would ask them to open their journals. We would do just basic like vocab, whether it's doing a Venn diagram or a T chart. Sometimes we would draw a model and label it. And so I'd have them open their journals, get started, and then I would ask for volunteers. Sometimes I would tell them what they were doing, sometimes I didn't, just to add a little bit of mystery. And so usually I'd get a few volunteers and then I'd pick a student to swap places with me. So I'd have them
Ooh.
come up to the front. I would go sit in their seat. And basically we just swap roles. So I would take notes while they called on students to fill in our T chart or a Venn diagram or to label our drawing. And honestly, they were so engaged. It was just a random idea I had one time. And these 8th graders that I had, wow, they ate it up. And so it was really great to see my kids who weren't typically engaged, who maybe didn't wanna listen to me, but they're gonna listen to old buddy over here who's, leading the classroom. And then, of course, we always had our fun moments of the ones who were in charge of threatening to send kids to the principal and stuff like that. So, like, there was fun that happened. That was not the goal, but it really did kinda snap their attention, like, "Oh, this is not how we normally do things." And so just that swap of routine really did, like, capture their attention, and I would look around the room and everyone's actually taking notes, which is not always the case. And so this is not something I did with every class period based on the students once I got to know them, but it definitely is just a quick little thing you can do for 10 minutes just to go over and review something that maybe you learned the day or two before that they absolutely ate up. So if that's something you can implement, then by all means, we want you to try new things.
I love that, because that's something where you don't have to prep any materials for that. You don't have to plan extra time in your lesson for that. That is literally just your lesson that you're having somebody else go on up and just do a little part for you instead. You get a little break. They get some more engagement. It's a win-win. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, you say they get a little break, but I definitely was kind and took notes for them. I was like, "Okay, let me not have them sit down later and be like, 'Wait, she didn't write anything?'" So I would fill out their notes for them. So that was also more encouragement for them to volunteer because they know if they go up and do my job, then I'm gonna take their notes for them. So that was just a little bonus.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation, and they want to let you know that applications are now open for the 2026 Faith in Nation Student Forum. Each fall, the Herzog Foundation hosts an incredible 4-day retreat for outstanding high school seniors from Christian schools and homeschool co-ops. The Faith in Nation Student Forum gives students the opportunity to strengthen their Christian worldview and engage with government leaders. Students can also participate in team challenges, outdoor adventures, and social events designed to build leadership skills and lasting friendships. The Herzog Foundation covers the cost of the retreat, all except travel, making this an amazing opportunity for your high school seniors. Help them apply. Applications close September 18th. Learn more and apply at herzogfoundation.com. Now, back to our program.
Amanda, did you have any more ideas on how to increase engagement?
Yes. So I don't know what the power of a Post-it or a different piece of paper or a different writing utensil, but those hold so much power from every grade level that I have worked with. If students are just really slow with filling out a worksheet, because, sometimes we have to have that worksheet, like there's just no getting around it sometimes. And they're just being really slow and they just don't want to do it. Get out your bucket of different colored pencils and pens and gel pens and flare pens and pens that have, or pencils that have different charms and stuff on them. Just giving them a different writing utensil in a different color. The class always 5 minutes. They were magically done. And also sometimes instead of saying you're going to fill out your worksheet, you give them like four pieces of a Post-it note, and they can write their answers on that Post-it note and turn that in with their paper. And somehow just writing on a different piece of paper instead of that worksheet or their lined paper, they love it. I would roll out like some big butcher paper sometimes, and you put your answers in your own little space. Draw yourself a square. They would just lay on the floor and they would write, fill out their math problems or their short answer questions. They would just write it on the butcher paper, and just changing up the paper and changing up the writing utensil. It's magic.
Yeah, we did whiteboards a lot, and so that's what my kids always loved. But I'd say, "Okay, go get a whiteboard, marker, and rag." It's just like you see their faces light up, and they know that, oh, we're doing something a little different. Like, she's gonna expect me to follow along and participate, but it definitely changes the pace. And one thing I always did too was have them write on their desks. I know that kind of scares probably some teachers at first, but just hear me out. Okay, so we would often use dry erase markers or chalk markers, and those do really come off well if you've got just like some vinegar spray or a Clorox wipe. So we always keep those on hand, but we would do this a lot for reviewing before a test. So we would do like a brain dump where I'd have students write down one fact in front of them. We kind of even turned it into musical chairs a little bit, where I'd play music, they'd walk around the room, and when the music stopped, you sat at whatever spot you were at and then added to that person's brain dump. So it's great for test review, or if you're doing, like I mentioned earlier, if you're labeling a model of something. I taught science, so we did lots of models. Venn diagrams, T-charts. So just having them do something that's unexpected. Like, yes, the teacher is giving me permission to write on the desk. Like, that automatically just makes you go, oh, wow, well, maybe I should pay attention to follow along because this is different than what we're doing before. And so we obviously want to encourage you to try new things in your classroom. And when we talk about this, though, just keep in mind procedures, those need to stay constant. Like your expectations, those need to remain the same. But we're talking about maybe where the kids come in, it's not, oh, Monday means notes, Tuesday means worksheet, Wednesday means quiz. Like, we want you to try to engage kids with your lesson, but obviously expectations we talk about a lot here at Teach for the Heart. So those do need to remain constant and steady. Make sure your kids know what your expectations are before you go into these activities. But don't be afraid to like switch it up now and again. It's not just engaging for them, but it's engaging for us too.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you said that. Before I would ever switch up anything, we always did a super quick, what are the rules? 1, 2, 3. What are the expectations? 1, 2, 3. What can you do? What can you not do? And so that way they know this is not just fun time, right? This is engagement time. To be engaged, you have to follow our rules and our expectations. And just piggybacking off of what you had said about how you used to write on the desks. I had a classroom where our tiles were like the 12-inch by 12-inch tiles. And we used to do our math on there and it would be like big math, where with the third graders, they were learning how to do multi-digit by multi-digit multiplication. And so we would do real big on each one of those 12 by 12-inch squares. They would do their math. So it's like grid paper, a giant grid paper. So you can even go to the floor sometimes, but make sure do a little test strip, make sure it wipes up because one class did wipe up well, one did not.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we don't want to upset our janitors, let's make that clear, like, we need to be nice and be friends with our janitors.
Yes.
They should not be cleaning up after our crazy ideas, like, yes, I love that, that's so cool. I did have another idea that I wanted to share too. So one thing that I was always doing with my students that they absolutely loved, which required really no prep from me, was turning our worksheets into a little bit of a game. So a couple of games we did. One was Connect Four, and then another one was Capture the Flag. So I'll just kind of go over how we did those, and then I've got pictures and videos that I can share too, if you're watching on YouTube. So with Connect Four, this was definitely a fan favorite. So I would take a worksheet. Usually we would divide it up into maybe questions of like 4 or 5. So we would chunk them. And then you'd have your students get into pairs. And then each pair was part of a bigger group or a bigger team. So our Connect Four colors were red and black. So we had black team and we had red team. And so the students would work together in their pair. They would work on just one chunk, so maybe 4 or 5 questions at a time. And then once they finished those questions, they would come up to me at the front of the room. I would check them. And then if they got them correct, then we would use a Connect Four board. So I've done this, a few different ways. We've had like an actual Connect Four where it's just a tiny game that I set at the front of the room. I did write a grant to get like yard games. So we did have a giant Connect Four at one point in the classroom,
I love it.
which definitely was fun. And then I've even had it where I didn't have any supplies and I did it on a whim. And so I just Googled blank Connect Four board and I projected it on our whiteboard and then had the kids color in the circles rather than dropping pieces. And so they're answering questions. They are like working because they don't want to let their team down. And if the student gets a question wrong, I would just send them back to their team. They'd work together. So they're working in pairs, but part of a bigger team. And then the first team to get a Connect Four, they'd get a point. I would erase the board or drop all of the chips, and then we would just go again. So typically we did this like the whole class period. And I'm telling you, even the most apathetic kids were super engaged. And if I had given them that worksheet like I had any other year, it probably would have stayed on that desk without a mark on it, or maybe ended up in my trash at the end of the class. But just taking it and twisting it a little bit and giving it that flair really, really helped engage them. And like I say, my most apathetic kids were fully focused and engaged. And I got great feedback as the teacher because I'm really able to see, okay, do these kids understand this? Because they're getting in the moment feedback. So we loved Connect Four. That is definitely one to try if you are brave enough.
Yeah, I love turning a lesson and review into games because I was a math teacher. And if I were to tell students, okay, you're going to do 75 math problems today during this class period, they would be like, what? Like, I go to the nurse. I don't feel so good. I got to go to the bathroom. But they would easily do 75 math problems if we were playing a game. So it's crazy what they can do whenever you turn it into a game instead of just that paper to pencil worksheet.
Right. And
Love it.
so we did that with Connect Four and then also Capture the Flag. This was a little bit of a newer one that I tried in the last couple of years. It does take a little bit of prep, but honestly, you could do it with sticky notes. But essentially, you do break the kids up into teams like with Connect Four. So they are working with a partner, but they're usually part of a bigger team. And so maybe I would have for this game like 5 different teams. We come up with silly team names like come up with a sea creature. That's your team name. And then each team would get colored flags, or again, you could do colored sticky notes. And so what I would do is I would have in my head or written down for myself, not for them to see, different point values for each flag color. So once they answered their chunk of questions from their worksheet, they'd come check with me. If they got them right, then they could take a flag from another team and put it in their team pile. So they could keep these on their desk, or the way I had done it, which I've got a video I can show, I put it on the whiteboard. So it was behind me, so they'd go and they'd move their flag from one team, put it on theirs. And so by the end, I would count up their flags, but to encourage not rushing. What we would do is I would have different point values for each flag that they didn't know. So after we counted up the flags, I would say, okay, well, the green flags were worth 5 points, the blue flags were worth 1 point, and and so I'd give different point values, and so that definitely helps a little bit with the competition aspect because I don't want those kids who maybe work a little bit slower to feel discouraged about that
Yeah.
competition. And so who knows, you could be lucky and maybe you only had 3 flags left, but maybe they were worth 5 points each. And so that
Yep.
also just adds a little bit of mystery too. But yeah, just these little tweaks that you can do that does not have to make you start over from scratch. You don't have to go and buy all of these supplies. You really
Mhm.
can, just with small little adjustments, just really increase engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I have found is that these free and very low prep little changes that I did was a lot more effective than when I would do, an hour of research and print and laminate and completely change my lesson. And it when you keep it simple like this, it's
Mhm.
effective and it can be very engaging. The more elaborate that you get, oftentimes the less engaging it can be because it's distracting for the students.
Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of people may ask too, like, why does it matter? Like, why do I even have to do this? And one thing that Amanda and I had talked about was the fact that Jesus was a very engaging teacher.
Mhm.
He could have just sat down and gave us the list of rules. Here's what you can and can't do, and that's it. But really, he wanted to connect with his people. He told real life examples, parables. He would demonstrate. I mean, he would do miracles just for the sake of proving to us who he is, who he said he was. And so just even just looking to Jesus as that example of how we live in life, but even how we can be as a teacher because he was the greatest teacher after all.
Yeah, and when he was speaking to us, he would speak to us in psalm, with commands or with, like an urgency, like, "You need to do this." So it really engaged all of our emotions. It engaged the behavioral side of us, that emotional side of us, and that cognitive side of us to get us to think about some things. Like with these parables, we had to relate them back to our lives. So yeah, he truly is the ultimate teacher, and we can learn a lot from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you would love to take these, we hope you will implement them into your classroom. Again, it's not one size fits all. Every teacher is different. You know what's best for you, you know what's best for your kids. So, maybe it will just spark an idea for you. And we wanted it to be simple, not reinventing the wheel, but maybe something you can try even tomorrow if you wanted to do a little bit of a shakeup in your class. So, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And thank you, Amanda, for chatting with me.
Thank you so much.
This episode is brought to you in part by the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.